Hi everyone, how are you doing today? It's Evan and Terry in the Great Herbal Outdoors again, and we want to spend a few minutes today telling you, teaching you a little bit about one of our favorite herbal allies. If you give us just a couple seconds, we'll show you a picture of it. This is one of our very favorites, and this is kind of a feeble specimen. And the reason for that is because this plant does not normally like as much water as it has been getting. Usually it's quite more robust than this, but this is called Yarrow. Some pronounce it Yarrow. The Latin name is Achillea millefolium. And I'm pretty sure Evan can tell you what some other names for this plant are. What are the common names?
Carpenter's weed, field hop, little feather, warrior's woundwort.
That's quite a lot to think about already. So if we think about warrior's woundwort and carpenter's weed, what do you think they were talking about when they named the plant that? Do you have any ideas?
About stopping bleeding.
Yeah. How about little feather? Why would they call it that?
Pick one. It kind of looks like.
I don't have you in.
It kind of looks like a feather.
It sure does. All right. Evan mentioned that it was often called field hop or field hops. And why would they call it that? Do you know what hops were used for?
Making beer.
Yeah, so this was an alternative herb used in making beer. Because it has a bitter flavor, it would have the same kind of flavor that a hops in a beer would. But let's go back to the fact that the Latin name is called Achillea millefolium. Millefolium means 1,000-leafed or 1,000 parts of a leaf. And the Achillea part has to do with one of your favorite Greek gods. What do you know about him?
Well, his mother dipped him in a bucket or barrel in Yarrow water, but had to hold him by his heel. So his heel didn't get protected by the Yarrow. So when he went to war, they say that an arrow was shot by the Trojan prince, Paris, and Apollo guided the arrow to his heel.
Apollo must have known that was his Achilles heel, get it? His
Yeah.
weak spot. Yes, and so what happened then?
Then he died because, well, that part wasn't protected by Yarrow.
I suspect he got an infection in there. And so the legend says that Achilles died from being shot in the heel. But we do know, whether the legend's true or not, whether, this mythology has any fact to it, or if it's all fiction, we don't know. But we do know that Achilles was one of the bravest, most handsome, strongest warriors in the Greek army, and he used this plant extensively to help with battle wounds for his soldiers. So thus it was named after him. Oh, shoot. Now we've made reference to the point that this was used on the battlefield. So what we know, I would say the number one property that Yarrow is very useful for is that it stops bleeding. And I've been told it stops really severe injuries also, like even an axe or hatchet in a leg or a chainsaw. Heaven forbid, I don't want to think about it, but if you were out using any sort of tools of any kind, or you had any kind of a wound that was bleeding, the first thing I put on them is Yarrow, and I generally just find it where I know it is in the yard. I chew it up and I put it right into the wound. I have also been carrying Yarrow dried and powdered in my purse or my travel bag so that when I'm out and about on a hike, I have that available. If I get an injury, I can just put it right in the wound and allow that to stop the blood. It's almost instantaneous. It has that effect. But along with that, it also has some antibacterial properties, so it allows the wound to not become infected. So you can always use it that way. We call it the master of the blood. That's the first property that's very important about yarrow. Secondly, as I sort of mentioned, it fights infection, so that could be anywhere. A lot of people will use yarrow as a mouthwash or put some on their toothbrush to brush, especially if they have any sore gums or infected tissue there. It's a good way to use yarrow. It can help you, yarrow is used as a febrifuge, which is a big fancy herbal name that says it will allow your body to sweat when it needs to sweat. Like if you have something coming on, especially a cold or a flu, influenza, and it helps resolve the fevers. So rather than taking ibuprofen or some sort of NSAID, if you would use a yarrow tea, that would allow the sweat to rise to the skin and expel the toxins and help you heal faster without suppressing the fever, which is our body's way of healing. It helps you digest food. So we also talked a little bit about it being in beer, right? And part of the hops or the yarrow in the beer is a digestive aid. So anything that's sort of bitter like that helps get our liver going, and we do a much better job of digesting our food that way. So less problems with stomach issues and so on. You know of another use of it, don't you?
Yeah, for mosquito repellent. If you hang it around where you're gonna be, it will repel the mosquitoes.
Sure, and you can I've even made it into a tincture and then taken the tincture and added some witch hazel and a couple of other essential oils that fight insects, and use that as a spray or something to pat on my arms and back of my neck when I know I'm going to be out in a really very much mosquito-ridden place sort of thing. And last thing I can think of that's sort of interesting in many ways is that this has been used throughout centuries as a protection herb. You see how it was used for Achilles. They dipped him in the yarrow water to protect him. It's used for psychic protection, physical protection, strong boundaries, so you're not taking on other people's energy so easily. But it can also be used, like Evan mentioned, hung up around you, and very typical of Native American uses, they would hang bunches of yarrow bundles in their longhouses to keep the mosquitoes and other insects away, especially if they were fishing and they had a salmon harvest, let's say. I don't know what the right word for that is. If they were processing salmon and they wanted to keep the bugs away, they could use it that way. Is there anything else we need to mention about yarrow?
I don't think so.
Well, it makes a beautiful wildflower cut in a vase.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can use it in a tea, a strong tea, for anything that's topical, like wounds or sores. You can put it on your arm as a poultice or a wash. You can take it as a tincture and just dry. Put it on those wounds. Try it out. Carry it with you. Oh, by the way, one more magical use. They say that if you're a woodworker or a carpenter or construction worker or someone who's working with tools, you should carry a piece of dried yarrow in your toolbox or with your whatever tools you're using as magical protection so that you don't end up having any of those wounds. Anyway, that's yarrow. It's still blooming in many places, especially if you live in a place where they cut the ditches early and they've now come back and are blooming a second time. Are we ready to say goodbye for the day?
Yeah.
All right. Go out and check out that yarrow. Get some protection. Bye.
Bye.